and welcome to The Art of Sales, a talk series on sales enablement. My name is Tanya and I'll be your host for this interactive series from Zipteams. Sales enablement is a critical aspect of any business and it's something that can make or break the success of sales team. That's why we've brought together some of the top sales leaders in the industry to share their insights and experiences with you. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Mr. Aditya Jain, Vice President of Sales at Mojocare, a full-stack platform offering personalized healthcare. Thank you so much for joining in today, Aditya. And without further ado, we'd love to know a bit about you and what you've been doing at Mojocare.
Sure. First of all, thanks a lot, Sonia, for having me over. It's a pleasure to be here. To answer your question, what I've been doing at Mojocare, we are a pandemic-born company, so we started off way back in 2020. I joined pretty much around when the company started in November 2020. And ever since, I've been looking after all the business functions, sales being the primary of them. So from being like a two-member team in the inside sales team to right now, I think being almost 120 plus salespeople at Mojocare right now, that's the scale that I've been seeing and I've sort of enabled. Apart from that, I also look after the post-sales fulfillment experience at Mojo. Given my prior experience in supply chain as well, I've also tried setting up the supply chain experience at Mojocare. So starting from warehousing, logistics, and helped set up teams around that. And all the other ancillary functions around sales, which is like sales operations, training and quality, and obviously some other functions as well.
All right, perfect. So Aditya, the sexual wellness industry is still a pretty hush-hush affair. So what made you take up this role and how are you and Mojocare basically addressing the taboo around sexual wellness?
Yeah, I mean, that's very right, but also very unfortunately in a country like India, which is the second most populous country in the world, with almost 1.4 billion people living in this country alone, we do not have a brand that resonates with sexual wellness. So the idea was very simple, that we wanted to become the country's largest and the most affordable treatment-centric intimate wellness platform. And for us, the primary category that we want to start it off was sexual performance for men in two kinds of disorders, which are erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. The reason why this got me excited is number one, the novelty of the problem statement. There's no one else who's trying to address this problem. B, the way we wanted to address this, not being very sales-centric or product-centric, but being very, very treatment-centric, because the kind of stigma that's associated to the space or the kind of broken customer experience that any distressed customer goes through in a country like ours, we felt very strongly about that, and we felt we can actually come and build something very meaningful for our consumers. And the entire prospect of brand building around this space, understanding consumers, understanding what they're going through, giving them treatments, and not just solving the physiological aspect of the disorder, but also psychological part of it, sort of got me very excited. And I felt that, this is something that I should be taking up as my next career stint.
That's amazing. So how has the past year been for you and the overall market? And how do you see the things shaping up for the upcoming year?
So I think it's been extremely, extremely enriching on a lot of fronts. Number one is, first of all, understanding who is my consumer, because I think that's extremely important even before you start selling. And I think getting all of that data from multiple sources, which is the consumer himself, or from the frontline sales force, or from the customer support team, or from the marketing data, just understanding what the consumer wants, right? So, and sort of breaking them into buckets and understanding what kind of communication works with them, what kind of pricing works with them, what kind of script, as you may call it, works with them. Because ideally a consumer comes to you and expects a magic pill. That's the kind of expectation that consumers have. But then in reality, you understand that if you really want to sell a treatment, then it's a long-term process, right? So for the business to work and for the treatment to happen, it's going to happen through a very well thought of process. And I think we spend a lot of time understanding what works to which set of consumers. So that was one. I think once we cracked that code, we tried ramping up in terms of what was working. So as I was, I think, previously mentioning, we just started out with 2 people way back in Feb 2021. Right now, we are more than 140 people in the entire sales workforce across multiple categories, across multiple teams. And a lot of work went into hiring, training, enabling them, aligning the right set of incentives, and understanding what works and what doesn't work. Right. So that was second, and I think third was also into what's next for us. Right. How do we measure productivity? Like where do we feel that we're doing good, and where do we know that we're not doing good? And that is where sales operations became very, very important for us. We wanted to understand every single step, every single activity that our sales agents were doing to convert a sale, and then getting very deep into data, and then helping our frontline sales army become extremely efficient. And I think that's like a org level, like a org-wide initiative that we've taken up. So yeah, I mean that pretty much sums up as to what we've done in the last year. I'm very excited about what's about to come in 2023.
All right. So like you just mentioned that you started out with a team of 2. I'm sure the setup must have changed. So post the pandemic, how did your sales team setup change? And what were some of the more, some of the procedural changes that you implemented during that time or you've implemented since then?
Right. I think there were around 3 stints where we had to move to a hybrid setup. As I was mentioning, we started up in November 2020, and after that there were 2 to 3 lockdowns, which disrupted the entire way of functioning. So yes, we did move to a hybrid setup. We did move to a work from home setup, but we were always, work from office first, right? But having said that, I think it's important to get visibility into what's happening on the floor, right? And that happens through, having the right tools in place, ensuring that your teams are actually making use of those tools, creating visibility around it, creating metrics around what's acceptable versus not acceptable, penalizing versus incentivizing on good and bad performance, and things around that, right? So I think the importance of processes rather than micromanagement became very clear to us, where we said that even if managers aren't around, or even if senior leaders aren't around, things should go the way it is designed to go. That took the limelight, and then we started working around what is it that we can do and what to automate a lot of sales processes, and without any manual intervention, how do we identify the bad and the good actors in the system, right? So which is when I think the CRM that we're using, or the cloud telephony that we're using, or the WhatsApp productivity tool that we're using, and a lot of things around that, we started exploring, and then we started implementing as well. So, and apart from that, the obvious, right, where, if anyone unfortunately contracts COVID, you give them a COVID leave, you give them, mental health benefits. So we have in-house clinical psychologists. So anyone was free to just go and, have a therapy session. Then there were other benefits the company was extending just to ensure that everyone is comfortable. We didn't really want to push them beyond a certain point, but then also ensure that the numbers weren't taking a huge hit.
All right. Yeah. So, like, you just mentioned that there were certain metrics that were set around, being able to see the sales performance, etc. So now, how the current market scenario has turned out to be, what are some of the factors that you feel affect sales performance in general?
So we are a D2C company right now. So our ticket sizes are lower. Our sales velocity is very high, right? So if you look at the current market scenario where, the recession is just around the corner, and then there's a funding winter, and there's a lot of concern around that. It hasn't as much affected us because fortunately we closed Series A just a couple of months ago. So we have a very healthy runway, plus the revenue numbers are also great, right? So, but what has become extremely important is to extract more out of less. And I think initially with the kind of capital cushion that all of us had, the efficiency sort of takes a backseat, and then it becomes more about increasing your headcount, right? Here we know that there's going to be a lot of cautious hiring going forward. We want to hire the right set of people. We don't want to overhire unnecessarily, but whatever we have at our disposal right now, how do we make the most out of it? So the entire importance of sales operations has shot up immediately, right? Just to understand, how do I save 1 minute per lead of my sales agent who's working on a lead, right? So if that's the problem statement, that requires every single person from tech to marketing to product to Salesforce to sales ops, everyone get into how a lead is being churned. How can we better do it? How can we increase the sales velocity? How can we increase net revenue per agent? And if that happens, then we eventually start doing better, right? In lesser number of sales agents. So I think that's very clear to us, and which is why a lot of hiring has started happening in these functions rather than just sales revenue teams. That's I think one thing that I feel has changed in the past 1 to 2 years, and how we see 2023. And of course, I think in terms of exploring new GTMs, ever since the pandemic hit, the online numbers had peaked to some very unimaginable numbers. But right now, there's a lot of preference to offline distribution as well. So as a company, I think we are also trying to ride on that wave and then understanding how can we reach where our consumers want to see us. And offline becomes equally important for us to explore as a GTM. And I think that's going to be the key focus for us in 2023 as well.
You mentioned a pretty interesting point about less being more, and how multiple verticals have to now work in a collaborative effort. So just wanted to understand, what are the new sales technology stacks that you are exploring or you're adding to the current hybrid team setup? How's that working out for you?
Sure. All right. I think there's this barrage of tools that I can think of right now, but the problem statement that we all work towards is, how do I decrease time spent on a lead by 1 minute by a health coach? That's working with me, right? And that's a product problem, that's a sales process problem, that's a marketing problem, and all of the teams come together. So number one is that I'm pretty clear that my team or the sales team need to spend their time selling, right? Selling will happen when my customers talk to my consumers. My agent will be able to talk to my consumer if the customer picks up the phone, right? And that will happen if I have higher connectivity. And that will happen if I'm working with the right cloud telephony platform. And that will be enabled if the visibility to leads and the information around those leads are on real-time basis. So everything is reverse engineered. And we understand that the efficiency of the current CRMs that we're using, is it the best or can we do better, right? So I wouldn't take names of which sales tech stack that we're using, but if you just talk about cloud telephony, I think a lot of sales organizations are just restricted to, what's my total talk time, what's my connected talk time, what's the unique number of calls, and so on and so forth. But we go much deeper into that, right? So we understand, how do I automate calling for my people, right? How do I automate disposition of calls for my agent so that none of it is manual? And I think a lot of focus is going around that. That if my health coach is spending 9 hours in the office trying to connect to the consumers, how do I ensure that he or she is on the call for, let's say, 4 to 4.5 hours without manually trying to trigger it? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, of course, communication, right? So in India, what you've seen is that people aren't very comfortable talking, especially about this over a call, at least the first call, right? So they would want to do a lot of conversational, they would want to set context over WhatsApp and then maybe start becoming more comfortable to do a call eventually, right? So how do we ensure that conversions and great engagement and communication happens on WhatsApp as a platform? So that's been the second focus. And given the kind of space that we are in, it becomes very difficult to get a verified WhatsApp for business account. So we've actually figured out other solutions around it. And right now, we are working with a few, but then of course we're always thinking about what to do next. So WhatsApp as an engagement platform and as a sales platform becomes very important for us. Third, of course, I think building the top of the funnel using our in-house application. That's going to be our key focus. We recently launched, but I think that's primarily being used by customers who enter into the Mojocare system and not, being used as a hook for generating leads for the sales team. That's going to be another focus. And I think the fourth, which is the biggest needle mover, is the CRM that the salespeople use. So they spend all the time on the CRM that that gives them lead visibility, that tell them what to do next. So cleaning dashboards for them, giving them real-time visibility of numbers, populating the right set of leads basis priority and sequence, making it very easy for them to connect to the consumers, making it very easy for them to follow up the consumers at the right time, is something that we are very, very keen on. And I think that's going to be the focus for the next couple of quarters at least.
So you just very beautifully actually reverse engineer the whole process of breaking things down. And the ultimate crux of it is sales teams and representatives need to be empowered and enabled and made more independent. So considering that, how are you setting your sales targets, or how is Mojocare setting their sales targets for 2023? And what are your critical focus areas going to be going ahead?
Yeah, so I think a part of the answer to that question has already been discussed. However, we will not do anything fundamentally different, right? I don't believe in doing something exceptionally different when I know that incremental changes is what is possible, and efficiency is what we're going to be focusing on, right? So scale is something that we are focusing on, that's for sure. How do we go from X to 2X in terms of count? But in terms of revenue, how do we exponentially go from X to 4X, right? But efficiency-wise, I think improvising on the tools. How do I make my health coach's life the easiest? How do I ensure that there is very little brain work and my health coaches spend a lot of time talking to my potential consumers and building a rapport with them, making them explain what Mojocare can make a difference to their lives, is what I'm going to be focusing on. Apart from that, I think 2023, as I mentioned, online wise, these are the initiatives that we'll be taking, but I think offline GTM is something that we'll be exploring. It's going to be a new journey for us, so we don't really understand and know what's going to happen, but a lot of team building exercises are going on. We're trying to collaborate with a lot of other partners in the space. We're trying to understand how the other companies have been trying to crack this market in general. There's a lot of action happening in the procurement side of things, where we want to ensure that once the systems are in place, the inventory is available and it's equally distributed as per the demand. So that is how it is. Otherwise, we have our own science behind how to set up targets, basis tenuity of the agents, basis the number of people currently active on the floor, basis what are the numbers that we have committed to the board, and basis the new GTMs that we want to try out for. So that's there. The actual numbers are a little confidential, so I won't be able to reveal those numbers right here.
That's absolutely understandable, not an issue. So, we'd also love to know a little about how did your journey with sales start? And as you mentioned, you've set up a whole team at Mojocare. So what are certain thumb rules or personal philosophies that you swear by as a sales leader?
Okay. So as far as my journey in sales is concerned, I think it started around 7 years ago. This was in one of the biggest hospitality startups this country has seen. And I was leading offline sales way back, I think in 2016. And the idea was to crack the corporate and the travel agent sales market for that particular startup. So that is how it started. But I think the kind of mentorship and guidance that I got throughout my journey and throughout my stint there really changed my perspective about how sales is done. And I think that was my first foray into the space altogether, right? If there is one thing that I really look for while hiring, or that is iterated time and again to the entire team, that is shameless persistence, right? How do you shamelessly persist? Because in sales, whatever your conversion numbers are, 1 minus that percentage is your rejection number, right? And that's 4x, 5x of your approvals or your win rates. So I think what makes or breaks is how shamelessly persistent you are. And this goes across the board, right? That this could be an inside sales agent, this could be a TL, this could be a sales manager, this could be an AD, this could be a VP of sales, or this could be the founder himself or herself, right? So that's one value that we really gauge. And before hiring every single person across levels, we want to ensure that that person is shamelessly persistent, right? As far as my philosophies is concerned, I feel that I'm a man of processes. I feel that being sales is the most exposed function in the entire org. Everyone knows what happens with every single lead, right? And that's where all the action happens, right? They are the ones who are actually talking to my consumers firsthand, and they have a lot of intel. So it's the primary responsibility of everyone across the board to make their lives simpler, to keep them happy, to keep them highly incentivized. And that is what I keep thinking about, right? How do I make their lives easier? How do I keep them happy? How do I bring in this level of satisfaction in their work? How do I sort of spend, a lot more time with them? How do I have fun with them, right? And I feel that that's pretty much worked out for me, and I hope to continue this way.
That's perfect. So, like you said, they are the most exposed vertical in the organization, and obviously they are handling a lot of things at the same time, and that requires a lot of mental space as well. So, what is the sort of a pep talk that you give to your sales folks to keep up with targets? Like you just mentioned, that a majority of the percentage of them interacting with consumers is rejection rates. So, what is the pep talk that you give your sales teams normally?
I don't think my team is really interested to, have a pep talk from me, but it depends, right? I think if you actually, if I actually look into my team, there are different motivations for different sets of people to do what they're doing, right? One thing that I try and keep communicating or over communicating, that I think sales is less about motivation and more about discipline. I think motivation I think it works against you in most of the times, and discipline is what keeps you going. So for me as a leader, what I try to ensure is setting up discipline mindsets in my entire team, because if that happens, then I don't need to be at the mercy of motivation. Because today, if something happens, then my people could be deeply demotivated. And if something good happens, then they could be motivated. I cannot build a predictable sales engine if my team is dependent on motivation, right? So I think it's discipline over motivation for me anytime. That's one. Secondly, it's very important for us to understand what is it that drives a person, right? And it could be anything, and there's nothing wrong or right about it. For example, a lot of people, and I think all of us are extremely driven by money. And that's one of the reasons why all of us work in whichever capacity. So aligning the right set of incentives is extremely important. I've seen performances change drastically from what it used to be versus what it happened after we fine-tuned the incentives and we made it more relevant and achievable, right? So I think incentives and the prospect of money making has to be there. Secondly, you would see a lot of people being driven by the feel-good factor that comes with community recognition, right? And that community recognition happens in peers, amongst friends, amongst family members, and so on and so forth. So what we usually do is like, we definitely do our R&Rs. We make that person feel extremely special. We reach out to their family members. We congratulate them, right? We thank them that they've actually let this person be with us, and we show our sense of gratitude. And I think that makes that person feel extremely special. And I think that is what drives a set of my team. And we do it again in a very disciplined fashion. And third, of course, I think it's a tangible reward, and those tangible rewards could be in terms of medals, trophies, certificates, gift items, so on and so forth, because it's such a great brand recall thing, right? Every time you see that, you want to keep doing better. And we have this concept of a rolling trophy culture, where if Sanya is the best sales leader in an organization, she would have access to that for 1 month. But for you to keep holding on to it, you will have to keep performing, right? So it's not that you just get like one medal once and that's about it. For you to consistently be there, you have to keep working towards it. And then that also creates a very healthy sense of competition around that person, because it becomes very realistic. When you see someone who's sitting right beside you, killing it and getting rewarded time and again, people who really want to make a difference actually get motivated, actually become a lot more disciplined in their jobs. And I think that feeling of tangibility, because you can touch and feel and see it all the time, makes a hell lot of difference. That's there. And plus, I think we do a lot of fun activities. I think that's very important. We never discount on fun. Could happen every day, could happen every week, could happen every month. Doesn't matter. Playing with them, taking a break, going for meditation breaks, going for runs together. I think a lot of that team bonding becomes very important, because a lot of times you have to ask them to stretch beyond the certain limits, and they will do it very happily if they trust you, right? So as long as the trust factor is there, as long as the bonding is there, I feel things become much easier, and I think that is something that we take very seriously at Mojocare.
It's really amazing how you've sort of woven together culture, the idea of a team, motivations, and just recognition all together. And it just seems amazing to be a sales rep and to be part of the sales team at Mojocare. So thank you so much for joining us today, Aditya, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It's been amazing hosting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sanya, for having me over, and all the best to you and the entire team at Zipteams.
Thank you so much.